film in these gentlemen's career and try and do that in the space of about 20 minutes, and then open up the floor to questions. It occurs to me to ask you guys, I mean, it's just so apparent when you watch this film, and you've got to remind yourself this film was released in 1968, and the special effects are amazing, but it's also amazing because the style of film that it is, science fiction films up until then have been dominated by special effects, bug-eyed monsters, or cautionary tales. In the 1950s we saw all those films about communism and all sorts of ideas infiltrating the American consciousness. But this is a totally different kind of film that changed the rules, and I think in the 40 years since, even the kind of generic blockbusters you see, they're also obviously influenced by this film. Would you guys agree with that?
Absolutely.
I agree with you.
You notice he did all the work on it, I just say absolutely.
When you were called to take part in this film, did it come as a complete shock to you? That your agent said, hey, Kubrick wants you?
Take it away, Keir.
It sure did to me. I was doing a film in London. It was a film called Bunny Lake is Missing that Otto Preminger was directing with Laurence Olivier and Carol Lindley. And when I came home at the end of one day of work, and not the first day of work, but sometime during the schedule, and my wife said, call your agent. So the time difference by that time, it was in the morning in New York, so I called my agent, and he said, are you sitting down? And I said, yeah. He said, you've just been offered the lead in Stanley Kubrick's next film. It was good he asked me if I was sitting down, because I was blown away. I had been a real fan of Stanley Kubrick ever since I was in drama school, when I went off to see a Kirk Douglas movie one afternoon. I had the day off or the afternoon off, and it was called Paths of Glory, and blew me out of my seat. And of course it was directed by Stanley Kubrick. So I became a Stanley Kubrick fan, like in an instant. It remained so all through Spartacus and Lolita and Dr. Strangelove. And so I didn't know that it was in the works. Obviously, Kubrick had been looking at film on a lot of people probably, and I'm sure, you know, on Gary and on others. And he had looked at three bits of film on me. One was David and Lisa, for which I won a Golden Globe several years before this film, and another film called The Thin Red Line with Jack Warden. And the film I was doing currently, which was My Leg is Missing, and Otto Preminger sent him outtakes of that, so that's how I got the film.
Well, my situation was, I don't know where I was because I was young and wild. And anyway, my agent called me up and he said something about Stanley Kubrick has offered you a movie, you know, 200 weeks at very little money. And I remember saying to him, oh, he's going to pay me? I thought maybe we had to pay him. I didn't understand. I said that to my agent. But I very quickly one day asked Stanley, after we had been around him a while, we knew that we were not there by accident. So I'm not trying to toot our horns, but we never had audition or anything. We both had these offers out of the blue, and you kind of think, how unusual. Then later, when you know him, and then you know, my God, you've been screened like the FBI.
With Stanley, nothing was done by accident. He was the most prepared director that I ever worked with. He spent years in advance of this film. If you take it from the time that he optioned the film, which was well, he didn't. Option the story. It was based originally on a short story by Arthur C. Clarke called The Sentinel, which I had read when I was like around 12 or 13 years old.
So
I was a science fiction fan, and I used to subscribe to all the science fiction magazines like Astounding Science Fiction, Galaxy Science Fiction, Fantasy and Science Fiction and Fantasy, or something like that. There were three magazines anyway that I subscribed to at that age, and my mother would give me every year. They used to be anthologies, the best science fiction of 1950, whatever it was. And I remember in one of those anthologies reading The Sentinel, which dealt with just that portion of the film where the scientists are on their way to the moon to try to figure out what this discovery that they've just dug out, the monolith, is. That's all it dealt with, but it asked a big question at the end, and the big question was, they figured out that a passing intelligence millions of years ago in our history, mankind's history, when men were just ape men, they left a kind of, in a sense, a giant alarm clock buried, and only the uncovering of it would set off a signal into space. And the question asked at the end of the short story was, who was getting that signal? I'm paraphrasing the end. So Stanley was very attracted by the concept, and the rest, as they say, is history, which you've just seen.
I'd just like to add one thing very quickly. That's proper English here for you. Although I'm an American, so you know. I think we should all, I think all you people in Melbourne should be very grateful that your George, who owns this theater, had such a great print today, fantastic. And that you should, I think, you know, isn't it nice that he owns this big theater and we could all come in here? I mean, this is the only place in the world right now where probably you can see this film on the original format. I mean, when it first came on the screen and it said a Space Odyssey, I kind of sat back there and went, my God, I haven't seen that in, 40 years.
This was the most beautiful screening that I've seen. I've seen it many times. It's the most beautiful screening since the original premiere. So I'd like to thank the people responsible for this screening for inviting us to Melbourne. They've been lovely to us. Everyone we've met have been particularly lovely. And what an honor, what a tribute to Stanley. Stanley would be very proud and pleased to have seen the screening of this film.
You're being far too modest as to your talents, Keir. You've achieved some incredible milestones in your career, including the starring role in this very influential film. But how do you explain this? Folks?
I'll tell you, it did not make the top of the pops, I promise you.
What is that from?
That's an album I cut.
A cup of coffee, and lots of hugging and kissing too. A groovy corner, a table for two. A cup of coffee, a sandwich, and you. I don't need music. And you.
You know about this, Gary?
Well, okay.
That blew my mind.
Listen, I have to say this